Om Amriteshwariyai Namaha. Om Amriteshwariyai Namaha. Om Amriteshwariyai Namaha. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitaamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambattvamanusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravindat Yatapatra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Tela Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panai Jnana Mudraya Krishnaya Gitamrita Duhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopala Nandanaha Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdham Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanura Mardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Amriteshwari Namaha. Thank you for joining us again as we begin the verses of chapter 15 of the Bhagavad Gita. In chapter 14, Lord Krishna explained how the creation is constituted of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, and that the Paramatman, the Supreme Being, is beyond Maya, beyond samsara. Chapter 15, which is the chapter we're beginning now, depicts in detail how samsara branches downward from its source, which is the Paramatman. We'll go into that in more detail in a moment, but just understand that the root is in Brahman. The chapter begins with a metaphor describing samsara, and last class we heard Shankaracharya explain why. He said that it is to help Arjuna, and us too, to develop vairagya or non-attachment towards mundane life. Now that word non-attachment comes from a Sanskrit word, vairagya. Vairagya simply means freedom from attachment, freedom from likings, like that. Just being equal towards everything, right? But that word vairagya, when you hear it in Sanskrit, it sounds like some kind of foreign notion, an artifact of some sort, left to us by the rishis through the medium of the scriptures. But in reality, we exercise our vairagya all the time. Did you know that? With no struggle at all, I'm going to give you some examples. With no struggle at all, we renounce rotten food. We renounce the dirt on our skin and our hair using soap and shampoo. We discard the end of our fingernails and toenails after clipping them. And we all too happily renounce the liquid and solid waste that accumulates in the body by paying a visit to the washroom. Why are these instances such effortless tasks? You're relinquishing something. It is easy for us because we know that if we don't discard these things, the result will be pain and misery. Eating rotten food, having poor skin, hair, or nail hygiene will eventually make us physically sick, and not going to the toilet will drive us crazy. So these simplified examples suggest that we can consider vairagya, non-attachment, to be relinquishing that which brings pain and sorrow. It might not bring the pain and sorrow right away, but now or later that will come. In the case of things that we are not attracted to, like putrid food, there's no need to even contemplate whether we should keep it or not. We just throw it away instinctively. The problem comes when we have a liking for something. What about those kinds of things? We have a liking for it, but we know, or at least we sense, that it's going to bring pain or sorrow, or both, sooner or later. That is when we need a subtle power of discernment. It's like a microscope that can be turned backwards to reveal the layers of attachment hidden deep within our mind. That power of discernment is called viveka in Sanskrit, and it is considered to be the very first quality that a spiritual seeker needs to cultivate. Why? Why not love? Why not something pretty then, instead of discernment? Well, because our vairagya, our detachment, will only be as strong as our viveka, as our discernment is. And remember last time Krishna said that without detachment, we cannot attain God. We cannot reach, we cannot merge into God. And that means we cannot merge into Amma. We're going to hear a lot about that today, so I'll leave you with that for now. But I want to share with you one of Amma's examples of vairagya. You must have heard her say, refer to a little bird sitting on a dry twig, ever ready to fly away. The bird knows that the twig might snap at any moment, so when the slightest wind comes, it prepares its wings in preparation for flight. So our attachment to the dry twigs in our life is what keeps us from being able to fly away, even when the twig is breaking. So it is a really good sadhana for us to read Amma's teachings and periodically ask ourselves, am I ready to fly away when the twig breaks, or am I going to sink with the ship? And remember, vairagya that comes as a reaction to some kind of disappointment is only temporary. This, I'll tell you a brief story. It was sophomore year in college, and I had a big disappointment in my life, which really made me depressed for a few weeks, I would say. And during that time, somehow, I don't remember how I got this book, but it was a book of the teachings of Lord Buddha. And of course, his teachings are full of vairagya, full of non-attachment. The world is like this, you know, people just are selfish, and all the things that I was feeling at that time. And so I read that book, and I thought to myself, I'm going to shave my head and become a monk. I was 19 at the time. And I'm so glad that I didn't do that, because I wasn't ready. I had a lot to learn, and I still do. But definitely, I'm almost positive that I wouldn't have survived as a monk at that time. I hadn't even met Amma. How am I going to follow all the strict rules without having a living master in my life? So Amma herself also says that viveka, the vairagya, non-attachment, has to come through discernment. And that is a kind of maturity that I certainly didn't have at that time. That viveka, that understanding, comes from observation and analysis of one's own life. And more than like when something bad happens to us or when we are upset about something, if we can feel like renouncing or feel vairagya when everything is going well in life, that is something that we can trust more. Shouldn't be when you're at rock bottom. It should be when you're really, things are going well and you still feel, you know, this is not giving me any contentment. That's how it should be. Now, let us go into the verses of the chapter. The reason why I talked about vairagya for so long is because it's going to be a key concept in this chapter. Since we are chanting the verses for the first time in chapter 15, we have to add some mantras. I'm looking at the screen. Yeah, it's in Sanskrit at the top, so you might not be able to read it, but you can just repeat after me. Ata panchadashodhyayah Purushottama yogaha Sri Bhagavanuvacha Urdhva Moolam Adha Shakam Ashwatam Praharavyayam Chandamsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavida. The Blessed Lord said, they speak of an eternal Ashwata, or peepal tree, rooted above and branching below, whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows it is a knower of the Vedas. I took a little liberty in editing it. So here, samsara, all of life, is compared to an Ashwata tree. Ashwata tree, a lot of people get confused, so I'm going to clarify it, hopefully once and for all. The botanical name for this tree is Ficus Religiosa. A lot of people think it's a banyan tree, but it is not. The banyan tree that most people think about with the big leaves like this, the kind of, what would you call them, elliptical sort of shape, that is Ficus bengalensis. And it's a banyan tree. In Malayalam, it's known as peral. And this one we're talking about is Ficus religiosa. It's a peepal tree, it's a bodhi tree. It has a variety of names, especially the Sanskrit one, Ashwata. But it is not the banyan tree, it's a relative of it. And it has heart-shaped leaves with long tails. So now, if you know about Indian trees, then you know what it is. It's called arayal in Malayalam. So as I said last week, this metaphor comes from the Upanishads originally, and specifically the Kathopanishad 2.3.1. This is what it says in the Kathopanishad. This Ashwata tree with roots above and branches down is eternal. That which is its source is certainly pure. That is Brahman, and that is called immortal. On that are strung all the worlds. None passes beyond that. This itself is what you seek. So it adds another dimension to what Krishna has said in this verse. It's pretty, it adds depth and we could say profundity to it. So stringing all the worlds on that, what can you do? What can do such a thing? The only thing is Brahman, which is the source of all existence in the universe, and however many universes there may be. So that's why Krishna says they speak of, because other rishis have mentioned this or used this metaphor in other scriptures that came before Krishna's time. The Upanishads are some of the most ancient Vedic teachings. And Shankaracharya adds to this a quote from the Puranas. Actually, it's from the Mahabharata, Ashwamedha Parva, which refers to the same analogy, actually. It sprouts from the root in the form of the unmanifest. It rises high due to his blessing. He's talking about the tree. It consists largely of the branches of the intellect, the hollows of the sense organs, and the bhutas, the 5 elements, are its branches. Also, it has the sense objects as its leaves. Its beautiful flowers are dharma and adharma, with sukha dukkha in Sanskrit, we can say pleasure and sorrow being the fruit that it bears. All beings depend on this tree. Having felled and split this tree with the supreme sword of knowledge and attaining the bliss of the self, none returns from there. Very similar ideas that we're going to see, but we'll weave these explanations into one description of the tree. So when we read Krishna's description of the tree of samsara, samsara, if you didn't know, it means transmigration, the endless birth and death, death and birth, birth and death, is a cycle that goes on forever. Transmigration is a kind of an English word, but it's more of like an eternal cycle in the Indian concept, you know. Transmigration doesn't quite include that concept of a cycle, right? So it's not like you just have one rebirth, it's eternal rebirth until you realize God. And we have to remember that all the scriptures have two layers of meaning. One is vachartham, the other one is lakshartham. So vachartham means the literal meaning, what the words say. Lakshartham means the intended meaning. So you can read it both ways, but obviously what we're interested in is what is Krishna's intended meaning. Literally translated, this verse means samsara is a tree whose root is above. And then you get this idea, oh, it's an upside down tree. And you actually will find lots of such paintings or images online. And but I decided not to use those this time because it confuses people, and that's not something I should do actually. So I'll forego the images today about that. The intended meaning is that simply that Brahman is the root, the support of this samsara tree. Samsara has its origin in Brahman, and Brahman is the subtlest of the subtle. So in that sense, it is, because it's unmanifest, Krishna is talking about it as being above. We can't see it. It's just out of our field of view. But it has branches, and those branch down, and we can see those. The more it comes down to our level, the more materialized it becomes. Shankaracharya's commentary here is that they say that this tree of samsara with its root above is a riddle. Its branches are below. That means the branches symbolize the intellect, the ego, and the tanmatras, etc. Tanmatras, if you didn't know, it is the subtle 5 elements. The 5 elements that this body is made out of, these are the panchabhutas, which are concrete, physical elements. But the source of those panchabhutas is the panchatanmatras, which are subtle version of the 5 elements. You cannot see them, you cannot touch them, but they make up the intellect, the mind, and the energy sheath, etc. And all of them are comprised of the 3 gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. So the point is that they're all inert, actually, activated only because of the sentience, the pure consciousness. So we can perceive and understand the objects of the world, but not Brahman. It cannot be perceived. It's not an object of knowledge because it is the knower himself or herself. So that is the meaning of rooted above. It means it's rooted in Brahman. And Shankaracharya says on this verse as part of his commentary, Brahman, possessing the unmanifest power in the form of Maya, is referred to by the word upward. So that's the confirmation that we need, because Amma says we can trust his commentary. Because of its subtleness, by virtue of it being the cause, and also because of its permanence and vastness. That is the root of this world. We've seen this concept in other forms earlier in the Gita. The idea is that Brahman is existence itself. That is one thing we can never strip from Brahman and from this universe. It has a degree of existence, but that is coming from Brahman and nowhere else. And this metaphor of a tree is not just a coincidence. In fact, a lot of ancient cultures or traditional cultures have such a a metaphor of the tree, world tree or something like that. Different names for it, but it's similar concept around the world. But a tree, even a regular tree, you can't see the roots, right? At least you shouldn't be able to see them very much. Even though these ficus trees, they have a lot of roots that are above ground, the bigger ones are below ground, of course. So the idea is that since you cannot see the roots, they're subtler, they're very powerful. And they're the source of the tree's life energy. Just think about that, because we're going to go on to what that signifies in the metaphor. Like deciduous trees shed their leaves, right? Do they ever shed their roots? No. So that shows which one is more important to the plant. So what is the nature of this tree in the case of this metaphor? It is said that it's eternal, imperishable. How can that be? Because samsara is not supposed to be permanent, right? Well, this is the way it's explained. Even from a scientific standpoint, we can say that it is true in a sense, because through the seeds, the tree perpetuates its DNA by creating another tree. And the actual tree may die, but its essence is relatively eternal. There's nothing really eternal in the world. So the same holds for like a river or soil. On the micro level, it's constantly changing, but on the macro level, they are eternal, so to speak. So that is why Shankaracharya says in his commentary here, this tree does not last even till the next day. Every moment it perishes, the sages declare. It is eternal as well, since the riddle of samsara has been there from beginningless time. It is well known as the sustainer of the beginningless and endless series of bodies. Like a tree or a river, samsara is constantly changing, but it never goes away until we attain moksha. That's not Shankaracharya's commentary. I just added that at the end. So some people say, when did the first birth come? Amma will say there's no answer to that. Even Shankaracharya dodges that question. We'll get to that in a moment. If the entire tree is a metaphor for samsara, then what do the individual elements of the tree signify? What about the branches? In the Puranic quote we had a moment ago, it said that there are the intellect, the sense organs, the subtle five elements, and the physical five elements. And Krishna says that the leaves are the Vedic verses. Wow, what does that mean? Because the Puranic reference says that the leaves are the sense objects. Is he trying to confuse me or what? What is the connection? We can understand if we contemplate on the common role that is played by both the Vedas and the leaves on a tree. Leaves convert sunlight into food for the tree. And that way they protect and nourish the tree. And what happens in our case, what nourishes this body? Well, it's the sense organs and the sense objects, right? So that's how we feed ourselves, that's how we sustain this body. Sense organs, don't forget, it includes not just sensory organs, but also organs of action. So in order to eat, you have to move your hand. That's considered one of the organs. That power of locomotion or manual dexterity. You use that to feed yourself. You can't feed yourself, you can't sustain the body. So the physical body with the sense organs and the sense objects is the way in which this physical body is sustained. So to the Puranic reference, we have to include the sense organs in addition to that reference to the sense objects, because both of them are needed, and they're both made up of the same gunas, anyhow, sattva, rajas, and tamas. They're part of Prakriti. That's all past chapters 13, 14. You have to refresh yourself on those two, and then you'll catch up. Now, what about this reference to the Vedas? How can the leaves of this tree of samsara be the Vedas, the hymns of the Vedas, or the verses of the Vedas? This is what Shankaracharya says about the leaves. The leaves are the Vedic verses that cover and protect the tree of samsara. As leaves protect and nourish a tree, so too the Vedas serve as protectors of the world, for they reveal what is dharma and what is adharma, as well as their causes and their effects. That means karmic effects. So now, this is going in a little bit of detail because I don't want you to get the wrong impression from this verse. I have to clarify something. When we talk about dharma and adharma being in the Vedas, along with karma, not just the action karma, but what we incur upon ourselves from our actions, what part of the Vedas is he referring to? Some of you may know that the Vedas are divided up into 4 categories: Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishad. They all have different purposes. And the Upanishads are considered to be the highest teaching of the Vedas because they give priority to moksha. And that is our supreme dharma, paramadharma. Much more important than anything we can possibly do in this world. We can be a complete failure in the world, but still attain moksha. Then this life is fulfilled. The purpose of this life is fulfilled. But it is said that if we live a human life and we don't attain moksha, we are a miser, because all those qualities and opportunities that were given to us by God went to waste. So we just piddled them away, and for that reason we're a miser. So this kind of thought process comes in the Upanishads, nowhere else. The Aranyakas are, preparatory scriptures for reading the Upanishads. So together, those two, Aranyakas and Upanishads, comprise what is called the Jnana Kanda. It just means the knowledge or wisdom section of the Vedas. And you might be surprised to find out that comprises only about 24% of the Vedic mantras, of which there are 2.5 million supposedly. So 24% of that. What is the rest about? Well, that is what's coming up. First of all, I just want to make it clear that, when we're talking about dharma and adharma, that's not the Upanishad section. It's not the Jnana Kanda. It's not the wisdom section of the Vedas. It's the other section, what we're going to hear about now. The remaining parts, Samhita and Brahmana, are called the Karma Kanda, the action section, or you could say the section that determines how we can change our karma by doing actions, which is also called karma. And this section is full of verses praising natural forces and formless gods like Indra and Rudra. In those days, Amma says there were no temples, there were no anthropomorphic deities. They were just formless. And so the Vedas, that section of the Vedas has lots of explanations how to attain our goals in this world by invoking the blessings of these divine forces. And that's what I encountered when I started reading the Vedas. The first time I went to India, because I heard the Vedas were everything, so I wanted to learn what they were. And all I saw was like these worldly desires and how to achieve them. And I was like, this is ridiculous. But I later found out that, what I'm going to explain now. So it's this part of the Vedas that Krishna is referring to in the opening verse of this chapter. And this is an important point to understand here, that the tree of samsara is sustained by the karma kanda of the Vedas. It's sustained by these the desires that we have and the methodology set out in the Vedas for fulfilling those desires. People have lots of desires, and that's why there are more verses in the karma kanda, in the desire-based part of the Vedas, than there are in the moksha-based part of the Upanishads, because I would say today not even 24% of people in the world are interested in moksha. Maybe 1% if we're lucky. But back in those days, maybe the ratio was different. People used to follow the instructions in the Vedas. They would perform rituals and they would get what they wanted, then repeat that over and over again. So just like the tree's leaves ensure that the tree's existence continues, so too the karma kanda portion of the Vedas ensures the existence of samsara. That's not the intention of the karma kanda, though. That's what you're going to hear. If that was all that the Vedas had to offer, it would be a horrible trick on humanity, wouldn't it? Just make them, it's like the hamster in the hamster wheel over and over again. It's just a cruel joke. Fortunately, the Vedas are engineered in such a way that one's faith in the scripture is bolstered each time the individual turns to them for satisfying their desires. Gradually, the people reach for higher and higher levels of happiness until they reach the highest form of happiness, which is being with Amma, right? Actually, yes, but ultimately she is going to force us to look at moksha, to realize our own self. And because she knows that is the highest of happiness there can possibly be, self-realization. And the answer of how to reach that self-realization is also in the Vedas, but not in the Karma Kanda, it's in the Jnana Kanda. So you realize, okay, I have to shift, I have to look at these kind of texts, these kind of teachings. This is the only way I can really transcend all the stress and problems of this samsara. And when you think of the Vedas like this, it shows that today's materialistic society is kind of sad because it only has karma kanda. There's only ways to achieve what you want and fight for it. And there's no wisdom section to the materialistic society. And we can't graduate to the jnana kanda because it's not available. It's only available with a realized being like Amma. And even worse, the society, when it becomes purely materialistic, the divine power behind this world is completely forgotten. So Amma says we've lost our sense of gratitude. We lost our sense of what is okay to do in pursuit of our desires. She says it's okay to pursue your desires, no problem, but you can't hurt other people in the process, right? But that's what a lot of us do, right? So people are ready to do anything and everything in pursuit of their desires today. It was unlike the way it was taught in the Vedas. Amma's bringing back this tradition, but in her own way. She doesn't require people to learn the Vedas because we don't have enough time in our lifetime to learn these things. And we can learn a lot from her. Because we have her in our lives, she provides this missing link, the spiritual teachings that help us convert our mundane life into a pursuit of God and spiritual liberation. Under Amma's guidance, we can attain that supreme knowledge presented in the Jnana Kanda of the Vedas, even without studying the Vedas. Because Amma's words, her presence, and her actions have become an Upanishad. Too bad there's already a Upanishad called the Amrita Upanishad. We'll have to call it the Mata Amritandamayi Upanishad. I'll give you a little example of how somebody who seemed like he didn't have much to offer to the world was inspired by Amma to do something. You may know of Amma's housing project. It's been going on for quite some time, I would say probably 27 years now. Hundreds of thousands of houses have been built. And people learned about it from foreign countries, and I used to help some of the foreign volunteers to join in and build houses with us. And then another person from Japan got involved, and we had more students come. And on one of those occasions, one of the college students came from Japan. We had a lot of people from Japan over the years. And he was in a wheelchair, not just any old wheelchair, an electric wheelchair weighing, I don't know, probably over 100 pounds. And this fellow had, I think it was Lou Gehrig, no, he has MS. Multiple sclerosis. And he couldn't control his body very well at all. But he came to see Amma in Japan once or twice, and he was so inspired by her teachings and her example that his friends had been going on this house building expedition every year, And he says, I want to go also. So he got Amma's permission. And I thought he was just going to be there cheering everybody on. But he wanted to actually get his hands dirty. But he couldn't hold a brush because we were at that time, we were in the process of painting the houses, hundreds of houses. And they didn't have enough help, so every little help was needed. And so he said, I want to do it. So we piggybacked him up onto the veranda or the roof of the house, which was a place where they could sit or dry their laundry. And this is for people who lost their houses in the tsunami of 2004. And he goes up there, and he couldn't hold the brush, so we had to tape it to his hand with duct tape. And then he would dip his brush in the bucket and bring his hand out, and as soon as it comes out, it's already moving. And he got more paint on himself than he got on the wall. But everybody was so touched and inspired by his, persistence and his cheerful attitude as well. And somehow the word reached the local governor, and he came and gave him an award for his selfless service to the tsunami victims in a country that he doesn't belong to. So these kind of things show that the spirit of bringing back the ancient harmony that used to exist according to Amma is taking place around Amma. So in the fourth line of this verse, it says, one who knows this tree is a knower of the Vedas. Kind of sounds like a stretch, like how can you become a knower of the Vedas just by knowing this tree? Don't forget, it's not just any old tree. That tree is a symbol for the entirety of samsara, including its source. And what was the source? What was the root of samsara? Brahman. So if we know in full the source of samsara, that's equal to realizing Brahman. It's the same concept that we encountered earlier in chapter 13, where Krishna said, basically something from the Upanishads, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, means Brahman is the truth, is reality, and the world is constantly changing, so it doesn't have any independent existence of its own. That's what is the case of samsara in this metaphor as well. The world has an experiential existence. We wake up in the morning, we feel like this is my body, we feel hunger, we have to eat something. It feels so real to us. But that reality, according to the scriptures, is only borrowed from Brahman. And Brahman is the only existence in this universe. So the life that we are living in, what we are seeing, is only the shadow of Brahman. That shadow, just like it borrows its existence from our body and the sunlight, similarly, the tree of samsara relies on Brahman for its existence, without which it cannot exist. And that's why Shankaracharya says here, one who knows this tree knows the sense of the Vedas, since apart from this world tree and its root, not even an iota of any other thing remains to be known. One last sort of question I'm putting out there. If the tree is samsara, what is the purpose of knowing it? Why do we have to know this tree if it's only samsara? Very good question, even though I asked it myself. For that answer, we need to remember one of Amma's teachings, in which she says, children, to avoid suffering, we must understand the nature of the world. Even if we don't want to be a prisoner of this world, we have to understand how it works. By knowing that this world is nothing but samsara and nothing else, we save ourselves from suffering. To the extent that we understand, that much suffering can be averted. Like, for example, if you understand that a mirage is only a mirage and not an oasis full of water, that prevents us from taking refuge in that mirage, which would otherwise result in our doom. Similarly, taking refuge in samsara results in our spiritual doom. So if we understand how it works, we can avoid that problem. Now, let us move on to verse 2. From the second verse, the meter of the verses changed for a little while. So this is not the same meter that we chanted a moment ago. Adaschordhvam prasatastasya shakha guna pravriddha Vishaya pravalaha adaschamulani anusantatani karmanubandhini manushaloke. Nourished by the gunas, remember that's sattva, rajas and tamas. Below and above spread its branches. Sense objects are its buds, and below stretch forth the roots, engendering action in the human world. So that's how I have rendered this one. A little bit of change. So where we were relying on a Puranic reference or Shankaracharya's commentary to add in some of the interpretations, now we have Krishna saying it in this verse. And the fact that Krishna says, below and above spread its branches, and below stretch forth the roots, immediately after he said in the first verse, rooted above. It seems contradictory, but not if you take it as a metaphor, and if you take that rooted above to mean rooted in Brahman, like we said before. So that way we can avoid the confusion. But now we're seeing, he says, the below and above spread its branches like a normal tree, and below stretch forth the roots like a normal tree. So we don't have to think of it as an upside down tree. This verse is a kind of a confirmation that the intended meaning of the previous verse was not the upward. It's not physically upwards. It means that the root is Brahman, and which is much more subtle, and that the branches and leaves which signify, and the branches and leaves signify the facets of Maya. And spread below and above in this verse also means that there are many branches going in all different directions. Shankaracharya again helps us understand what those branches symbolize. We're so lucky for having his commentary. Today by the way, I'm going to share mostly Shankaracharya's commentary. Jnanadev has so much commentary here, and with beautiful allegories, but there's just no time to share it here. I may try to work it in the further or later classes, or maybe we'll just have a whole class about that, but because it's so beautiful but very lengthy. But this is what Shankaracharya says here. The branches are the karmic results of our knowledge and actions, and they spread from the realm of human, trees, all the way up to Brahmaloka, the full spectrum of the Vedic content. So what he's saying is that when we talk about karma, it means the kind of birth we mean, and the kind of birth we mean means the kind of body we get. So it could be a human body. We could take birth as a tree. That's what he's saying. Or we may take birth as Brahmaji, the creator. Doesn't matter. All of that is still part of samsara. If you didn't hear the previous classes, this might come as a shock to you. Heaven is part of samsara. Even becoming Indra is part of samsara. because it's all temporary. It's relatively eternal, but at one point, Amma says, when the bank balance of our good karma is depleted, we come back. It's a round-trip ticket, not a one-way ticket. Come back and start all over again with zero bank balance. So that's why we don't want to go to heaven. It's a temporary pleasure, that's all. So we could go anything from an amoeba to the creator. And the idea is that there's so many branches, there's so many different worlds, because we have Brahma Loka, all these different lokas are there. Not only the 14 that are stipulated in the scriptures, but there are sort of mythical ones as well. We don't know how many worlds there are, and they may just be referring to different universes, different dimensions. It doesn't matter. The point is that we may be born not even in this universe, a different universe. So it is as though there are many branches, as there are species or levels of existence. An elevated seeker may get a superior body, maybe even like a deva, like a demigod's body or something. And those who are live very selfish lives may be born as an animal, or even lower. And for the time being, we are all on the human branch, which means that our subtle body is now reflecting pure consciousness in the vessel of a human body. That's all it means. The consciousness is shared by everybody. It just so happens that we're all human in this birth. And as it is, but that's going to be different next time, possibly. Next time we might be born. Depends on how we use this life. And as it was said in chapter 14, it is the guna, or the quality, the attribute I am established in, that will determine what comes next. Krishna said in chapter 14, verse 18, those who are established in the quality of sattva go upwards, the rajasic people dwell in the middle, and the tamasic, abiding in the temperament of the lowest guna, go downwards. So we definitely want to try to keep our we could call like a vibrational level more towards the sattva. And in this verse, instead of referring to the gunas, he's just talking about karma, but it's pretty much the same thing, because like somebody who's very sattvic is going to do sattvic things and have sattvic karma. So it's only a difference in standpoint. And what is next in that description? He says that the branches are nourished by these gunas. And remember, the gunas are the basic building blocks of Maya. So everything is made up of these gunas, these sattva, rajas, and tamas. And Shankaracharya says, these branches are strengthened by the gunas which comprise them, and the branches have the sense objects as their shoots. He's repeating what it's already been said. And then on the big branches, smaller branches are also there, like buds. They emerge as buds. And he says those are the sense objects. So this tree is so amazing, right? It's our life, actually. The sense objects sprout like new leaves from the branches in the form of bodies, which are the results of actions. It could be a small body, it could be a big body, a powerful one, a weak one, a peaceful body, like a deer, or a very aggressive one, like a tiger. So we don't get to decide that. It's our karma has already decided it. So we're on the human branch now. Next life it could be the tiger, or the food of the tiger, the next birth. All depends on our karma. And that all depends on how we behave, how we use this life. So we are attracted by the fruit on that tree, which is, the food for the for the sense organs. And so the fruits are all these karmic fruits. And some of them are bitter, some of them are sweet, some of them are just tasteless. So this is the fruit on the tree of samsara is our karma phala, or the results of our karma. And we get attached to those, and that prompts us to do more and more actions. That's why he says engendered to action. And it becomes a vicious cycle. Do actions, receive the results, Oh, wait a second, I got to do more actions. Oh, that wasn't enough. I'm going to get the results. Okay, no, that wasn't it. I got to do more things. It's an endless cycle. And he says, below stretch forth the roots. So even though it has its primary roots in Brahman, there are a lot of subsidiary, secondary roots that spread all over. And that's what Krishna is talking about here. He says the Ashwatha tree, if you know, it has a lot of subsidiary roots that run laterally, and they're in search of water and nutrients. So when you know that, you'll understand Shankaracharya's commentary a bit more. The vasanas, or the latent impressions in us from past lives and this life, these vasanas create likes and dislikes. And that's born of our karma phala, because we've created those likings ourselves by repeated actions. Those become the subsidiary roots, our own vasanas. Kind of like to leave them behind, but it's not so easy. And those grow later on and become the cause of involvement in dharma and adharma. So our karma is feeding the tree, and the tree is using that to create more leaves, more flowers, more fruits for us to eat. It's scary. The problem is that we're feeding it. How deep do those roots go? We don't know until we try to remove them. Those of you who have tried to do sadhana sincerely know what I'm talking about. We don't know. Only then, only when we really try to remove or cut those roots, then we will come to ascertain how far the roots spread. The same thing goes for the tree of samsara. The roots are in the form of attachment. They're born from our likes and dislikes built up over many lifetimes. And we ourselves don't even know how deep and how far the roots go. Once we get serious and we try to do a lot of sadhana, then they reveal themselves. We thought the root was only this deep. No, it's all the way down there. Now you go there and you find it's even deeper, like it's going all the way down to China, it feels like, other side of the planet. The Chinese will say it's all going all the way to Chicago, but you get the idea. So when trying to meditate, some other thought may come into your mind. That's just because it's deeply entrenched in our subconscious. We may have a strong liking for something or a strong disliking for a certain type of people, and you start thinking about those things, or a place you want to go to, or a place you want to avoid, a person you want to avoid. All these kind of things may come up in the mind. That's because we nurtured those roots in previous lifetimes. And those deep running roots make us do all kinds of actions in order to get something or get rid of something. So just like with each additional root, the Ashwatha tree gets more nutrition to grow and become stronger. The samsara tree becomes stronger with each additional attachment we create. In the pursuit of our desires, we may do good things and some not so good things, right? Either way, it's going to produce some kind of karma, either bad or good, and we're going to have to experience that. So for that, we have to take another birth, and the cycle continues indefinitely. That's why Krishna calls it eternal in the first verse. That's why it's said that our likes and dislikes support, sustain, and perpetuate samsara. And where does all this take place? Doesn't take place on the moon, it's not some different universe, it's happening right here in our world. The human world, though. Why not in the cat world and the dog world, you might ask? Well, because only humans accrue good and bad karma. That's good news for your cat or your dog or whatever it is. Remember, karma means willful action with a motive. But the animals are mostly just programmed. I mean, not in a derogatory way, but they do what their nature tells them to do. And in a way, that's better than human beings, because they will always do their thing and they do it properly. They do their dharma. Human beings don't do their dharma. That's our problem. So actually, we should have more respect for animals than for humans. Humans are supposed to be humane, but we're not so much. But dogs always bark, cats always go meow, and they don't change their nature no matter what. They won't suddenly want to say, I want to have an ice cream sundae or something like that, or maybe a dog would, I don't know. But animals just, they do their thing, their instinctive things, and they don't veer from that dharma much at all. So there's no adharma for them, fortunately. That means that their karma is automatically reduced due to the hardship that they have in their lives. It's not easy to be a wild animal. Pets are a little different. They're kind of spoiled sometimes. But they don't have freedom, so that's also suffering. And what comes in the next birth is determined by the animal's sanchita karma, the total bundle of their karma. If they have enough good karma to be reborn as a human being, they get a shot at moksha. So let's continue on to verse 3. In our book, it shows both third and fourth verse together, but it's going to be a little easier to grasp the meaning by dividing them in half. So we'll just do the first half of what you're seeing on the screen now. Narupamasyeha tatopalabhyadhe nanto nachadir nacha sampratishtha ashwattamenam suvirodhamulam asanga shastrena dhrdena chitva. Stop there for now. I think I didn't change anything. Let's see. The form, origin, end, and existence of this tree is not perceived here. Having cut asunder this firm-rooted ashwata with the strong axe of non-attachment, ... What happens next we'll find out later, even though you're already seeing it on the screen. So that which is experienced but cannot be logically explained is kind of like magic, right? So that is actually one reference to Maya. It's like magic. Even one of the little boys, Amma asked him, it was about a month ago, I would say, or maybe more. I think his name is Aravind. She said, what is Maya? And he's Maya's magic. He was like 4 years old. If we can capture the magician, we won't be caught by Maya. But if we are fooled by the magician, then we become the prisoner of Maya. That was his explanation. Almost like beautiful explanation. But what is magic? It's something inexplicable. We can see it, but we don't know how it was done. This is at the individual level. But from the standpoint of the totality, this whole universe, we could say that God is the cosmic magician. Science may be able to explain a lot of things about this world, but the deeper and subtler they look, the less anybody can understand. Shankaracharya says, the form of the samsara tree is not known for certain here at all, as it is like a dream, water of the mirage, or a city in the sky. It is by nature destroyed no sooner than it is seen. Therefore, it has no end, no stability, and no conclusion. Similarly, it has no beginning. So here's where I thought about the Big Bang Theory. And I had an in-house consultant here in the ashram, our ashram expert, who's also helping with the live streaming. One of those people you cannot see but exists. See? It's like Brahman. You cannot see it, but it exists. So we all know about that Big Bang Theory. Scientists, according to our expert, what do you call it? Subject matter expert SME. Scientists are confident that they have understood what took place from 1 second after the Big Bang, but the details before that are kind of foggy, or at least they're hotly debated, I'm told. They cannot agree about what took place during and immediately after the Big Bang. That immediately after is crazy. It's like 10 to the minus 43rd degree or something like that. So, it's just might as well be the Big Bang itself. Why can't they understand, or why do they have to bicker about it? Because most laws of physics, as we know them today, came into existence only much later. So if the laws of physics came up later, we definitely don't know what was there before the Big Bang, right? It's impossible to know because our laws don't apply. And what about how all this ends? How's it going to end? Is it going to be a big freeze, a big crunch, or the rip? As I'm told, there's one other theory. Well, sorry to disappoint you, but it seems that the end of the universe is even more hotly debated in the scientific community. You know, I'm told that scientists have only started understanding the connection between gravitational waves and dark matter. And how much do you know about those? Probably more than I know. But think about it. The universe is supposedly already 14 billion years old, give or take a few 100 million years, right? And if we're only now starting to understand these things, who knows if we will ever find the answer before the universe is gone? So, due to the limits of our intellect, it remains an incomplete theory. And I would say that given what we know from the scriptures, it will always be unknown because the intellect is part of Maya. If you read Tattva Bodha, how all these faculties that we have, how they came into be, you'll realize that the intellect is just part of Maya. So it's a part of Maya, and then it can never go beyond Maya. If you want to know the source, you have to go beyond that, right? Well, he can't. The intellect can't, because he's stuck here with us right now. We can leave him behind and transcend Maya. That would be the solution, and that way we would find the source. But that's God realization. That's what we learned in the last chapter. Amma once said, the rishis of antiquity looked for the origin of the universe, and through the austerities, the tapas they performed, they discovered that Brahman, the absolute reality, is the source and support of everything. Brahman cannot be described in words. One cannot point to Brahman. The beginning and end of everything lies in that. Brahman is devoid of attributes, qualities, and form. How can the attributeless be described? Only that which has attributes can be grasped by the mind and the intellect. So, the scriptures put it bluntly. They say there's no actual beginning or ending. It's simply an endless cycle. That means that there's no end to samsara. Okay? That's like say it's the merry-go-round, never stops. And then you say, oh, I'm stuck here forever. Well, are you? Even if the merry-go-round is going around forever, what can we do? We can jump off of it. We can escape. And we need a guru for that, though. We need the teachings of the guru, which is, we're getting here now in the form of the Gita, and connecting Amma's teachings to that. And only that way can we become free from the endless cycle of samsara. In fact, liberated souls tell us that once we become free, we will see that samsara was just an illusion, like waking up from a dream. In that state, there's no question of when samsara started or ended, because it doesn't exist. It's just like a dream or mirage never starts to exist or stops existing. You can say, when did the mirage begin? You say, well, it doesn't exist, so I don't have any answer to that. So too it is with samsara. It can be experienced, but it has no reality. Many, many years ago, when darshan in Santa Fe was taking place in the on the Schmitz property, or what is now the Santa Fe ashram, or I think they call it the New Mexico ashram. Darshan was going on. There was a tent, And then there was just the temple where Amma would sit and give darshan. I just happened to be sitting next with her, eavesdropping on a very fascinating conversation. One devotee was telling Amma about all her sorrows and struggles, and she says, Amma, my mind is always, tricking me. And she was saying that, samsara she said, Maya won't let me go. And Amma laughs so hard, she says, no, it's not like that. You're not letting go of Maya. You think that Maya's not letting go of you. It's the other way around. And the woman said, how can you see all these so clearly? Amma, you just clarified my whole problem. And Amma just said in passing, there's no Maya for me. There's no Maya for Amma. And then she moved on to the next sentence. And I was like, wait, stop. Wait a second. Yellow card, yeah, that's an infraction. You cannot just say that one sentence and then change the subject. She said it was like eating a peanut, throwing a peanut in her mouth. It was just ridiculous. But really, she was revealing that she knows how to lead us out of Maya because she is free from Maya. Only somebody who is free from that. Like let's say, you have COVID and you say, I'm going to treat you for COVID. It's not going to work, right? Only someone who is not infected can help you. So she doesn't have bhavaroga, the disease of birth and death. She has transcended, she was born that way. So up to this point is Lord Krishna's depiction of samsara, the tree of samsara. Now we still have half of this verse, third verse to go. And starting from this second half of verse 3, he's going to explain how to get out of this cycle. The basic principle behind Krishna's solution to samsara is that you're never going to find the solution inside of samsara. Don't even try. And actually, when I suddenly realized that one day in Puri, the first time I went, I got so depressed. I was like, you mean I can't get liberation and have pleasure in the world at the same time? I don't know how, that was the day I got my mantra, or the night I got my mantra, and I was on the roof of the Kali temple. That was maybe March of 1991. And I was so inspired, I just chanted my mantra all night long on the roof. And when the sun rose in the morning, that dawned on me, literally. And I just got so depressed. It took me a few days to recover from that realization that I'm not going to get the solution to my spiritual problems in the world. I'm going to have to really strive hard and change myself. That's the problem. That's what made it so depressing. But due to lack of understanding, most people in the world look for a solution for their physical, mental suffering, confusion, and despair in the world. They look for the solution there. And there are more than enough people in the world who are interested in selling you something to solve your problems, right? Buy this, buy that. Get rid of this, get rid of that. So, according to Vedanta, this approach of trying to solve samsara with techniques that are inside of samsara, it says Vedanta says it's like trying to solve a dream problem with a dream solution. It doesn't help us wake up from the dream. So I'll give you an example. Like, let's say in my dream, I'm being chased by a wild elephant or something, right? And I'm terrified. And I've managed to escape the elephant by climbing a tree, the dream tree, right? And then what happens? A dream panther comes. And panthers know how to climb trees. And so then again, I'm scared and I have a problem. So I will never be truly problem-free until I wake up from the dream. And I'm not going to find that solution inside the dream. The same goes for samsara. We have all tried so many different remedies in our lives, but none of them succeeded in putting an end to our problems and hardship. So many things we bought to make our life better are now in the basement or in the attic or given away to somebody or sold on eBay, I would imagine, or just thrown away, right? Still, we don't question our own methodology. How can we not question our methodology after all these years? At least now we should understand that the solution for samsara is not available in the world. The solution is not in the tree of samsara, it is only in its root. That means we need to shift our focus from samsara to Brahman. Now, the fact that you're studying the Gita shows that that process is at least beginning for you, if not really on its way. But that's what is meant when Krishna says, cut asunder with the strong acts of non-attachment. It means shift from samsara to God or to what is eternal. Now this word non-attachment, or more bluntly we can call it detachment. A lot of people react to this. Why do we always have to say detachment, detachment, detachment? I would pose a counter question to that. Will you seek to eliminate something if you don't understand its negative effects? If you don't know that it has a negative impact on you, you won't think of eliminating it, right? But here's a real life example. For hundreds of years, mercury-containing products claimed to heal a variety of unrelated ailments. And mercury was actually used ubiquitously at all levels of society. People believed that it was actually good. I know it's kind of part of Siddha medicine in India, so that's a whole different thing. These are Western concoctions and quacks, right? It wasn't until the mid-1950s, just 65 years ago, that mercury compounds finally fell out of favor. How? Well, that was thanks to a solid understanding that heavy metal toxicity was actually not very good for you, it was actually really bad for you. Then the craze for products containing mercury automatically shifted to an aversion for them. And voila, we got detachment without any effort at all. This is a perfect example of Amma's teaching. You have to understand the nature of the world. Mercury is actually good for some things in very small quantities and only for certain applications, not to ingest. And it's definitely not good to apply on the gums of babies as it was believed 65 years ago. Mothers would put it on their babies' gums. Some kind of liquid had mercury in it. And then the babies were suffering like anything. Finally, they realized, much later. Similarly, since we are presently stuck on this samsara tree, whether we like it or not, we can and must use it for spirituality in small quantities and only for certain applications. We don't give ourselves over entirely to it, saying, I'm stuck here. But this is what Amma is teaching us. This is what Amma is teaching us to do. Use the world in small quantities for certain applications, like you can do research for social service. That's the main theme of Amma's university. Research or science, technology for a better world. It's not for a solution to our worldly suffering. It's never going to solve our problems, the spiritual problems. We can maybe provide electricity to people who are suffering without it. We can have solar pumps bring water from a well. We can teach people how to make toilets where there are none. So to avoid open defecation, which is a big problem in many countries. We can also use our possessions for a noble purpose and not expect them to give us any security or contentment. We happen to have them. Some people don't. We help them out. And I'm not going to depend on my resources or my wealth or my possessions for my happiness. So, Vairagya, that word that I mentioned before, remember, it just means detachment or non-attachment, means to stop clinging to samsara. But the urge to cling to something won't go away so easily. It's not like you say, I'm going to give up samsara and I'm not going to cling to anything. We have trained our mind and our intellect to depend on something. So we need to replace that with something else. And it's not something false or evanescent, it's something that is real and permanent. And we know intellectually that the only thing that is permanent is the Atman, the self. But I haven't realized that. So what do? That is why we have gurus. That is, we have a realized master and Amma. Amma is that symbol for us, because when we look at her, we know her, we see what a lofty life she lives, and what a perfect example she sets. We can follow that. That's tangible. And she knows how to lead us to the Atman. And she becomes a symbol for that. And the closer we get to her, the more we feel the Atman, the purity of the Atman through her. And it reflects in us, and we get closer to it within ourselves as well. It's not a surrogate spirituality. That's a big difference. And in the Mundaka Upanishad, there's a beautiful verse that summarizes what we have to do. In order to understand the eternal, one should approach a guru. Simple as that. Most people cannot turn away externally, which means take sannyasa and leave the world. Externally, you're renouncing the world also, not just internally. So most people can only do it internally because they already have families and jobs and things and obligations. So their challenge, which is almost everybody's challenge, is to keep their mind constantly turned towards God or Guru. And really speaking, detachment is only an initial step. But like we saw last week, without vairagya, without detachment, there's no hope for attaining liberation. So this is what we need to focus on now. Ultimately, we need right understanding, samyak jnana. But that requires a lot of inner purification, and the inner purification requires a lot of detachment. So we're stuck here for now. As we purify ourselves and as our mind is more, receptive to the teachings of wisdom, deeper teachings. Until then, we keep focusing on detachment. And this is what Krishna is trying to teach us also. So what exactly needs to be cut with that sword he's talking about? He says, this firm-rooted ashwata is what needs to be cut. That tree of samsara. So to uproot a firmly rooted tree, we need firm detachment. We need a really sharp tool. And it is we ourselves who have allowed the tree of samsara to get out of control, so that we are the only ones that can reduce it. And we have to, at the same time, increase our detachment. Amma always hammers that message of detachment, of vairagya to us. So I'll share a little conversation that took place around Amma. Once a devotee asked Amma, this is one question that comes up in India, sometimes in the West as well. For many people, isn't ashram life like escapism? Escape from real life? When they face unbearable difficulties and struggles, people take up sannyasa sometimes, or they try to hide from the world. Amma laughed and she said, such people will be unable to stick to it, my son. They won't continue in spiritual life. Spiritual life is only for the strong and the brave. One shouldn't adopt a spiritual life, without first learning to discriminate between the everlasting and the transitory, and without first developing detachment. One's aim in the spiritual path should be to understand the suffering of the sick and the poor, and to develop a life of selfless service on their behalf. This is really at the core of Amma's teaching, because this is her way of helping us cultivate detachment. Every breath a person takes should be one of sympathy for the suffering of the world. It should not be for seeking his own comfort. Still Amma's words. So we know what we have to do now. But this cutting process involves 2 stages, which are explained in this verse and the following one. I don't know if we might not get to the following one, sorry. In his commentary, Shankaracharya says, the strength of the weapon is derived from the resolute mind directed towards the Paramatma, the Supreme Being, and sharpened on the whetstone of repeated practice of discernment. That is wonderful. Viveka, you're constantly exercising your power of discernment, and that is the whetstone. That repeated practice is what is sharpening your mind, your resolve. The sword of detachment means turning away from the desires of worldly gains. And in Lord Krishna's list of divine virtues from chapter 13, we have this one in conjunction with dispassion. Reflection on the suffering and detriment associated with birth, death, old age, and disease. If you're young and listening to this, you'll understand later on in your life, what he's talking about, the detriment of death. Well, kind of the order is wrong. Disease, old age, and death. Right? So it teaches us a lot. So detachment is the first stage in destroying the tree of samsara. The second stage is proper understanding. All right, we'll try. We have about 9 minutes left. Let's try to finish this couplet of verses by chanting verse 4. Tatapadam tatparimargitavyam yasmin gata nanivartanti bhuyaha tameva chadyam purusham prabhadye yata pravritti prasuta purani. Then that goal is to be sought for, going where they, parentheses, the wise, do not return again. And once there, I seek refuge in that primordial being from which streamed forth the eternal dynamism. I think you missed the second half. Let's have that slide again. Can you see it now? Then that goal is to be sought for, going where they, the wise, do not return again. And once there, I seek refuge in that primordial being from which streamed forth the eternal dynamism. Okay. This is kind of a reference to an earlier chapter. Shankaracharya says here, what is this primordial being that is being referred to? It is that from which has emanated the ancient and everlasting process of the growth of the tree of samsara as a magic show by a wizard. So we have another magician reference here. So it means Brahman, obviously, because we've talked about that so many times. It's come up many times. And it's nice that this verse begins with then. Tata. That means after gaining detachment. Because previously he talks about attachment. And then the next fourth verse, he says then. So having gained that detachment that he referred to, we proceed. And remember, the divine virtue of detachment comes from viveka, from exercising our discernment. And that is followed by shama, dhamma, etc. You may remember the Samadhi Shatka. This is from the 4 qualities of a seeker, or otherwise known as sadhana chatushtaya sampatti. And that list of divine virtues, not the ones from chapter 13, but similar to that, that culminates in what is called mumukshutvam, the burning desire to know God. So having established yourself in those divine qualities, he says, strive for that goal, which is the realization of Parabrahman. And we see this same meaning in Amma's song, a very old song, which is so beautiful. And I'll just share a couple verses from that with you. Omkara divya porule varu Omana makkale vegam Omanayai valarnamayangal niki Omkara vastuvai thiru. Come quickly, darling children, you who are the divine essence of Om. Removing all sorrows, grow as endearing ones and become one with the sacred syllable Om. I don't know how this verse strikes you, but I had a very profound experience with this the first time I read it. I had just met Amma. I was still very confused what to do with my life. I mean, I was 21, I guess that's kind of to be expected. But I thought I knew what I was going to do. Some of you may know that I was going to join the military. I was accepted to officer candidate school. I was raring to go. And then some things happened. Some things were revealed to me, and somehow I wasn't sure about my path or my plan anymore. So I had 2 weeks to decide whether to join the military or not, and in those 2 weeks I met Amma. So after meeting her, I was just doing a lot of soul searching, and my brother gave me a copy of her biography, and I started reading it. I went to the mountains to do more soul searching, and there one morning I sat on a tree stump and I did what I thought was called meditation. And that didn't last very long. But I happened to have the biography with me, and I opened it up and I started reading from where I left off. And each of the chapters of Amma's biography has one of her quotes at the top, at the beginning. And so the chapter that I was reading, the quote came, this verse from the song, "Come quickly, darling children, you who are the divine essence of Om. Removing all sorrow, grow as endearing ones and become one with the sacred syllable Om." And I have no idea what happened. I didn't know anything about this. I'd never been to India. I was just your average American kid still, who thought he was great, actually. And suddenly I thought, come quickly, darling children. I have to go quickly. I have to go. And it was just like a wild man. I just packed up everything, jumped in the car, and I started driving back home. Because I knew she was in the Bay Area still, because I grew up in Bay Area, Northern California. And somewhere along the way, there were no cell phones back then, so I called from a payphone. I got my brother and I said, where is this Amma person today? And he says, oh, she's in our hometown. And so I went there to meet her. And actually, when I got there, it was so clear to me that she was going to guide me in life. And I started asking her questions, and that's a whole other story. But the fact that this verse has such a powerful impact means it's coming from the mind of a realized being. This is Amma's version of the Gita's words, strive for that goal. And the most beautiful thing about this song, and this verse in particular, is that Amma doesn't say seek or go there. Instead, she says, come. Come to me. Because she's already there. She has always been there, waiting for us to turn towards her. And she will wait there for as long as it takes for us to reach her. And what do we do What do we realize when we finally reach her? The second line of Omkara Divya Purli tells us, Innile jnananu niyam pinne ninnile niyanu jnanam Kannu kanaikayal bhinnamai tonunnu pinnamalennalidonnum. You are the I in me, and I am the you in you. The feeling of difference is due to the blindness of ignorance. In truth, nothing is separate. So that truth is the root of samsara, the real existence behind this illusion of samsara. The truth that nothing is separate is the highest truth. That is God realization, self-realization, self-knowledge. All the other sadhanas prepare us to realize that truth, but they are not the truth per se. That is why a young girl born to fisher folk can become a world-renowned spiritual leader without studying the Vedas, without learning puja, without going on any pilgrimages, without any family wealth or special social status, even without an elementary school diploma, because she was born, established in that truth. The feeling of difference is due to the blindness of ignorance, echoes the Guru Gita. Salutations to the Guru who removes the darkness of ignorance with the ointment of knowledge, restoring our vision. So with this, I think I will have to conclude today. We will pick up where we left off next week, which will be the remainder of this verse and as far as we can go in the chapter after that. So we will conclude with a couple of prayers and meditate on the content so we can try to assimilate it, because that is what is really needed, not just the intellect. We need to make it seep deep within us, percolate deep within us. So we'll meditate and then conclude after that, only if you have time. Otherwise, these two prayers, concluding prayers, will be the end. Don't worry if you have to go. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Close your eyes. Check your posture. Slow down your breathing process. And feel the body and mind relax further and further with each deep breath. Try to feel Amma's subtle presence all around you. Feel as though you are enveloped in her embrace even now. She is the you in you, and you are the I in her. To slow down the mind even further, let us focus our awareness on the peaceful and harmonious flow of the breath. Simply witness it flowing in and out. With the mind now in the present moment, take a moment to observe your life in this tree of samsara. Take a moment to reflect on some expectations we might have had from this world, from the people or objects in this world. The expectations are rarely created intentionally. Over time, they develop. We get attached to them. And we hang our happiness on them. We feed more and more energy to the tree of samsara, and it only creates more and more leaves. Take one simple example from your own life. A misplaced expectation from the world. In retrospect, we can see it was a vain attempt, a vain expectation. It didn't solve anything in my life from the spiritual standpoint. Now, along with that, contemplate this. We have already tried that millions of times in past births, over and over. We have made the same mistakes. We have perpetuated the same desires and attachments countless times. This time, just this time, maybe we can relinquish such vain expectations. By now, we should be able to learn to expect nothing from this world. Every time the mind tells us to rely on the world, in this birth we should try to catch those impulses and redirect it to Amma. Remembering her, visualizing her form, chanting your mantra in whatever way, we drop that dependence on the world and shift it to Amma, the symbol of everything spiritual. She is the symbol of self-realization for us. We just have to remember her. Now we will conclude with one more final prayer. Take a deep breath. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnaad Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. One more long deep breath. And as you exhale, you can slowly open your eyes if you wish. Om Amriteshwariye Namah. Thank you so much for joining us. We intend to have the Gita class again next week. And the bhajans this weekend will be from the East Coast. And we will be presenting them from here on the 21st. Om Namah Shivaya.